Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Mike LaTulip here to talk some about Illini basketball. Of course, a heartbreaking, gut-wrenching loss at Michigan State, 80-78 on Sunday. But Illinois still rises in the rankings, 2 spots after the big win over Indiana. I think some people saw that Michigan State game. Illinois was still pretty good despite the foul issues. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the reasons Illinois lost this game as well. We'll talk about a big week ahead with 2 home games against Maryland and Northwestern. Mike LaTulip, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. Just, again, I think I mention this every time, but just being in the thick of it, between personal life, work life, basketball life, it's just wouldn't trade it for the world, man.
A lot of basketball happening, a lot of life happening, but here we go, Mike. This is a tough loss for Illinois. Obviously, the Big Ten race changed with this game. What a huge win for Michigan State, and what a blow of a loss for Illinois when it had a chance to win this game. And they missed free throws. They missed three-pointers. They had a 5-minute stretch at the end of that first half that they really regret. So they have their own blame in this loss. But there's a lot of fouls in this game and some questionable fouls in this game, and the referee impact is part of the story. I don't love bringing up referees a lot. We don't do that very much, but it certainly felt like the referees had an impact on Sunday's loss, with Kasparas Jakucionis getting in foul trouble and fouling out within 9 minutes, and multiple of those calls looking questionable to me. What was your thoughts on that entire part of the game? Because it was a big part of the game.
I mean, it's interesting, just the broader discourse around it. I felt like nationally, locally, whatever you want to call it, the officials were talked about more this past week than any other week during the season. And I just think there's no surprise that it felt like this past week had the most close games, and and a lot of consequential games at that. And so those calls that are made can impact the game. And so I thought it was just it was a super unfortunate situation, because you could sit there and 3 of the fouls on KJ were fouls. The first one, he got caught up in the air. The third one, his foot, it's an unlucky foul, but by the book, it's a foul. I mean, it's his foot's there. Aikens trips over his foot. It's a tripping foul. And the 5th one, you once again kind of get caught up in the air and leaning. But the issue was the 2nd and 4th foul. Those 3 fouls are complete non-factors. I mean, the 5th one obviously took him out of the game.
I hate that the 3rd one's a foul, by the way. His foot was there and he got stepped on.
Yeah, and that's why I said I was arguing with some people on Twitter, because I think they thought that I was saying that they weren't fouls. I said, hey, those are fouls that should not be called, but I've seen them called before, particularly the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th. The issue is that the 2nd and 4th are the most important ones. I know the 5th one takes you out of the game, but the 2nd and 4th ones were the ones that shelved you.
Yeah.
And so, you look and you just say, all right, bad calls, in my opinion. Just because if you want to get that ticky-tack with contact, then you can call a lot of those throughout the game. And for it to be in that spot, and I'm not even saying it's because it's KJ, that was super unfortunate, because it's just a noon CBS game, noon Eastern. And you want to see him out there. And I think anybody tuning into that game probably wanted to see him out there. The NBA front office guys that flew out to East Lansing probably wanted to see him out there. I'm not saying that's the reason to keep a guy in the game, but it's just that it really does. I mean, it messes up the game when you call those 2 that were the most, I think, consequential. But let's flip to the other side of this, because this is now for KJ. You never want to take the competitor out of a guy. You never want to take the physicality out of a guy. I think he's a good defender. I think he's a above average, good plus defender. Yeah. And so 4 fouls versus Tennessee, 4 fouls at Oregon, 4 fouls at Indiana, obviously the 5 fouls at MSU. I mean, this has become somewhat of a trend for him. And what he's battling and what he has to understand is, I've talked about it all the time, the freshman whistle that these guys get. You'll never get the benefit of the doubt as a young guy, no matter what your status is. And that's the unfortunate part of the situation. So for him, it's just being even more mindful in those spots. And it sucks, because he has to sit there and actively think, I cannot put myself in harm's way. That's how important I am to this team. So really delicate balance there. I'm sure they're talking about it with him. But yeah, I mean, despite the inconsistent officiating, and there was definitely inconsistent officiating, you still could have won that game.
Yeah.
You talked about the free throws, 5 for 24 from 3, 1 for your last 18. I mean, the opportunities were there. And I think also, if you're this team, I was shocked too. I hit you up and I was like, this is crazy. I mean, the national narrative after a loss, I don't think I've ever seen that. I mean, it's just like by and large, and everybody saw it. And it's not that I disagreed with it. It's that I just don't expect national media and people to really be like, hey, you know what? They didn't have their best player. And they still competed and probably should have won that game. Illinois is still really good. Illinois is still a Final Four contender. Illinois is still one of the best teams, if not the best team in the Big Ten. And we don't ever have that type of nuance in discussions. There's not much nuance going in between the fan bases. But to see that nationally, that's awesome, because I think it's people are recognizing the type of team Illinois is. But then the other side of it's like, I feel like you got to be sick of the moral victories if you're Illinois, right? Man, like, great to not have your metrics affected, but should have won against Tennessee and probably should have won against Michigan State, despite all the things you had to overcome. So, yeah, I mean, I still remain with this team. Like, this is I think the most talented team in the Big Ten. And when KJ's on the floor, they're a bona fide Final Four contender and national title contender.
But you're right. At some point, wins matter. Right? It goes into the college football playoff conversation. Wins matter. Like, Illinois could be 8 in the net, but they might be 14 or 15 right now. And kind of where the NCAA tournament committee would slot them, because they didn't beat Tennessee. They didn't beat Michigan State. They didn't get those tier 1 victories, right? So at some point, you got to turn those into victories. But one thing I want to bring up, Mike, you're right. Kasparas can't get that first foul, and he can't get that 5th foul. Those can't happen that early in the game. He is competitive, but he's got to understand his value is being on the court. So giving up a bucket is fine as long as he is on the court in some of those situations. But 2 of the last 3 games, Illinois has really struggled without KJ on the court. Not a huge surprise. He's a great player. He's a star player. But this is going to happen again. He's going to get in foul trouble again, or if there's an injury. Obviously, they've played well without him against Penn State. They hit a bunch of threes that day, but especially the end of that first half just seemed to get away from them. I was kind of surprised Brett Underwood didn't get KJ back into the game. I would have done it. Now, it didn't end up mattering because maybe he just would have fouled anyway. But is there anything you think they learned in that game or the USC game that when this happens again, if KJ's got to sit for 8-10 minutes, what do they have to do?
To me, the Michigan State game and the USC game were very different. I really didn't think they played poorly without him against Michigan State. Again, to be in that game and have a chance to win it when it felt like Michigan State was playing pretty well. It's not like they weren't playing well. And it's on their home floor on Mateen Cleaves in the stands. I mean,
for me, I thought the second half was pretty good. Yeah. For me, the end of that first half, and a lot of it, I think, was Kylan, right? And some of the decision making that went in there. But that stretch for me just really stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, the turnovers for sure for Kylan in the first half. I mean, he just I thought he lost his cool a little bit, and you could see like kind of his reactions after every turnover he had. And so it gets interesting when KJ's out, because I think it has a ripple effect on your rotation. And you saw at the end of the game, like, if I'm Trey White, I need KJ on the floor, because that's going to keep me on the floor.
Yeah.
And so, because what you run offensively is different and lends itself more to a Trey White. Whereas when KJ's out, and the shift that they made, and you saw it against Indiana, and then the real shift was, now we're putting Merez in there too. We're going 2 bigs, and we're going to pretty much show what looks like a double drag. So a double ball screen, Merez first and then Tomislav, and you kind of stagger it out. And what they really got Michigan State with up until Kohler made the adjustment was, it's just because we know they're showing on the ball screens with the big ball screen defender. So we're not even going to set the ball screen for Kylan to turn the corner. That's all just fluff to get the action. So when Kylan comes off, that's just to get the big to pounce out. And then it's a quick swing to Tomislav, catch, look, and throw over the top to Merez. They did that 5 times, and we'll show it on the film 5 times in the last 6 minutes of that game. And 3 to 4 times it was really successful. And then Kohler started to figure it out. He said, I can't jump out as much. This is just all fluff action. And he started to stay level with Mraz. I mean, it's what blew up the play. They ran the same play at the end when they didn't call the timeout. And Kohler was able to kind of sniff it out. So the personnel changes, because the last part for Trey, too, is if you're going to run that type of alignment with Mraz and Tomislav up top, you got to have two shooters in the corner.
Yeah.
And if you got to have two shooters in the corner, it's probably going to be Will Riley and Ben.
Yeah.
So Trey becomes kind of the odd man out. But I do think there's an opportunity depending on who guards Trey in that moment. I think Kohler would have probably shifted over to Humrickhouse if Trey was in. So you needed that big to pounce out on the ball screen, or else if Trey's setting that screen up top, they'll probably switch it and you don't get what you want out of it. So that's what changes offensively. And then defensively, Dre, Jake, Will, you just got to bring it on that end. And for Will, they set the high ball screens. You're at 6'8", 6'9", getting over the top of those screens. You got to continue to get better at that and not have Tomislav or Mraz sit in that drop for that long while you recover. I thought he did a pretty good job of it. Akins turned the corner, got downhill a couple times late, but this team's still really talented.
Mm-hmm.
Take KJ completely out of the equation. I mean, this is still a tournament team. Second weekend probably becomes things got to fall your way type thing. But this is, I don't want it to become this thing where it's like, man, KJ's not out there. You're not a good team. This is still a really good team.
AJ wasn't on this team. I wonder what Will Riley would be right now, right? With the ball in his hands as much as he would have it.
Tough to project. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to project. I think he can still be a guy that has a lot of production with minimal dribbles. I mean, he was a guy that was great making back cuts, getting around the rim. Tomislav at 7'1", making those passes and just throwing those kind of lobs by the rim for guys to finish. That's a really cool wrinkle that they've added to the offense with it was kind of like the spread elements that they had. Yeah. And that was kind of what they did with spread in a way. And had those guys kind of beat their man to the basket, throw it up top, lead them. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how they continue to mold that. But the goal is to have that guy on the floor. Yeah. And however you can protect him, and however he can protect himself, to not allow bad officiating to even creep into the conversation. All right, like I cannot pick up my main goal outside of setting the table for my team and being aggressive and playing hard on the offensive end. His goal every single game should be to avoid a foul before the first media.
Yeah.
Because all those games that I mentioned, he's had one, I think, in all of them. And now you're just playing with fire because the next just little whistle could be 30 seconds later.
Yeah.
And you're sitting out for 16 minutes. So again, hard to take the competitor and physicality out of a guy, but it's just, being more mindful of it, I think, for KJ.
Part of being a star in the college level here.
A freshman star. That's the tough part, because there are stars that I don't think are getting the foul calls that he got.
Yeah.
But the issue is that he's a freshman, he's new, and that's how these refs are programmed. It's dumb, but it's how they're programmed.
Are you ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active and busy lifestyle. And with over 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. So you can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. And Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. So reach your goals this new year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Illini50off and use code Illini50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Illini50off at factormeals.com/Illini50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, after the USC game, Brad talked, and it was both offensively and defensively, about how we need to use Tomislav better. They certainly seem to be running more through him. I might be wrong there, Mike, but what are you seeing? Because they certainly seem to be putting the ball in his hands. And boy, like there was some talk, how good of a passer is this guy? Last couple of games, especially against Michigan State, he looked phenomenal. So what are they doing there with him?
his against top 50 opponents, he has the second highest usage rate on the team. Right. And Kylan's got the ball in his hands a lot. Trey's got the ball in his hands a lot. But I think it does two things. One, it allows you to play through a guy that I think is a weapon, right? Not only just you got to honor his 3-point shot, so you have to pressure him. That allows for cutting lanes, driving lanes off of him. And so there's that part. The second part is I think it just takes pressure off of Kylan. That was part of the reason for the shift was, hey, we don't want to do, and Trey for that matter, we don't want to do the whole USC, Kylan, Trey, head ram, pound the ball into the ground for 40 minutes. That's just not really conducive to, I think, efficient offense. What those two guys are really good at is cutting. And how can we rework paint touches aside from just putting our head down and getting into the paint? Can we rework our paint touches to, some of what they did at the end of the game where you don't want Merez taking it off the dribble, but can we get Merez on a dive to the basket? Can we get Trey White on a dive to the basket? Kylan on a back cut? Kylan on a when we throw back to Tomislav on a vacate from the opposite wing running down to the middle of the paint? Can we do is like that's just more ingenuity in your offense and being a little bit more innovative. And I think that's what they've done. And Tomislav's a big piece of that because without him, I don't know what you would do with KJ out of the game if you didn't have that wrinkle to play to the strengths of these other guys. So he's got to continue to be really solid with the ball. I thought he got to the point and he was smart by the end of it where he didn't. There was one point at the end of the game where he was like, once Merez dives, I catch and I throw. And I got a little bit worried at the end. And then once Kohler kind of started playing it straight up, I was happy to see Tomislav not just predetermined Jamison Williams. I'm throwing it anyways. And yeah. So yeah, he's been super important to this team. I mean, we talked about it in the film review back in the summer or whenever, spring when they got him. And I told you, Jeremy, I said, if this dude doesn't work out and isn't a good Big Ten big, I'm done doing this because then I don't know anything. So I'm glad that it's
Rick Mast comp that I used over and over again.
Yeah. I'm glad it's worked out.
It's worked out. Yeah, for sure. He's a really good player. All right, Will Riley's first half flamethrower. Mike, what do you think that meant for him and the team? We've been talking about it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And it needed to happen for Illinois to have a chance in this game. So what'd you see there? And obviously slowed down in the second half a little bit, but what'd you see from him?
Yeah, it was coming. And I had a bunch of people tweet at me during the game like, hey, you said this on the pod. I don't know how brave it is to say that, a guy that's a projected NBA draft pick is eventually going to hit a couple threes and he's, being a capable shooter. But again,
Mike, just own it. Yeah, I told you. That was me.
Yeah, I told you, man. I told you. I mean, you could just see it. You could see it coming. He hit 3 late, I think, against Penn State. Game was kind of out of hand, but he needed one in a big moment on a big stage just to kind of break the ice. And you could see when that first one went in, it was on. And we saw exactly what we saw against, Team Durant in the AAU where he's going 15 for 16. It feels like anything he throws up on the rim is going to go in. But he's a young kid. And that moment and that barrage that he had, you hope that can translate, right? And that can take him a step further, right? They play 2 games at home. He's shooting 37% from 3 at home. I know you got some non-conference games sprinkled in there, but he has shot it well at home. So hopefully you can have him continue to get into a rhythm. And I thought that one thing you'll see on the film too, I thought he was really deliberate with his attacks. And everything was straight line drive, no BS, get into the paint, get it up on the rim. Even in the second half, he has the N1 to make it 69-74. And it was just a throw to the back action. Guy kind of over pursued him, and he just put his head down. He didn't spin dribble. He just got right into the paint and won. That less has got to be more with Will because every single game, if he plays 20 minutes, he's going to get 5 catch and shoot threes. It's just going to happen. The pace they play with, the amount of possessions they play, and with a guy like KJ on the floor and the gravity that he has, just you'll get 5 there. You may get 2 transition looks. You may get 2 trips to the free throw line off of attacks you have to the rim. I mean, that's 12 to 15 points for a guy like Will.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do much. So that's why I want to see moving forward. Just because you had this game against MSU doesn't mean you're like, shoot, I got to recreate that again.
Yeah.
And you can't get too far in your head with that. Just play the game, be in the flow. And I thought he did a good job of that against Michigan State.
I should have done this research before, but I'm just looking at the stats for Illinois here recently. Bench points: Alabama 24, Arkansas 19, Northwestern 18, Wisconsin 7, Tennessee 12, Missouri 16. Then we go to the Big Ten play. Oregon 32, Washington 16, Penn State 34, USC and Indiana 22 each, and then we have 40 last night. And that's during a Will Riley cold stretch, right? Yeah. This bench is really developing, and Merez Johnson Jr., another good game. I would call it a great game for him, especially in that second half. And Dre Gibbs-Allhorn gives you 7 points. Jake Davis hits a 3. How has this bench evolved, Mike?
I'd have to go back and look at the historical data, but it doesn't feel like this has been the bench points and the being reliant. I shouldn't say reliant, but having that icing on the cake hasn't really been. I think that hasn't happened that often. I don't think with Brad Underwood teams. I'm not saying it's like a Brad Underwood thing. I'm just saying they've been really top heavy with their production. So to have it more balanced and it's what makes Michigan State really good, by the way, is they just have a lot of depth, a lot of guys that they can throw at you. And Illinois, I think, is even more talented than at Michigan State. So it's been huge and it's been building. I mean, just beginning of the season, Jake Davis kind of playing sparingly. You got Dre Gibbs-Allhorn, flash in the pan early in non-conference, kind of. He has a couple shots that he hits against Arkansas, but not a ton in the non-conference. And in the Oregon game, he explodes. Jake Davis in the Oregon game explodes. And it's all just, man, this is basketball. You get confidence.
Yeah.
And you just, the hope is that you can continue to buy into your role and continue to say, hey, I'm not going to come in and wreck the game because I want my production to be the same as it is every game, because that's the reality with bench guys. Bench guys got to be okay with, man, it might be 12 tonight. It might be 0 next game. And how do you fare when you have to ride that roller coaster mentally? It's a really big strain on guys mentally when you're coming off the bench. And when you don't have predictability in your minutes, when you don't have predictability in the volume of shots that you have, it's just, I think these guys have relied on just, hey, be aggressive. That's it. That's all I got to focus on. I thought Dre was awesome. Tracking down offensive rebounds. I mean, the offensive rebound he went for in the second half, he just freaking bulldozed Jeremy Fears. I'm like, I'll take that foul. I will take that foul, because he's starting to show that he can really be depended on as a guy if KJ goes down. And even if KJ doesn't go down and you need to, Kylan gets in foul trouble, or you just need 3 guards on the floor, he's becoming really, really dependable. And the same goes for Jake Davis. Jake Davis, man, a guy coming from Mercer, still really young, hasn't played a lot of high-level college basketball. In Arkansas, he hits big threes, and Michigan State second half gets a ball thrown to him on the back action, knocks down a big 3 to put them up 5, I think, or whatever it was. I mean, these guys are just have a collective confidence about them, and that's much needed with guys coming off the bench who are looking to produce.
All right, here's the research I should have done beforehand. First 6 high major games, 16 points per game from the bench. Last 6 high major games, 27.7 points per game off the bench.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Maybe you had a little bench mob going there. All right. We should bring up this. This is a hell of a start for Michigan State, Mike. 16-2, 7-0 in the Big Ten. As you said, their strength is depth. Their strength is they are an Izzo team. They feel like they are just the sum of these parts is the sum is greater than the parts right now. I mean, good parts, but what do you think of Michigan State right now? Because they have the lead in the Big Ten. Purdue and Michigan are right on their heels. Illinois has got a lot to do to catch up to them, obviously.
You said this is an Izzo team, and we may both think about the specific play in that game that made you feel like, yeah, this is an Izzo team, is on a free throw miss. I think it was Trey White's missed free throw, or he might have made it. I forget. But Trey starts backpedaling to get back on defense, and Cohen Carr sprints all the way to the rim, lob, dunk in 2.5 seconds, maybe. And that's just that. Jeremy Fears has completely changed that team in that way. Yeah, like Hogard wasn't doing that. Tyson Walker was more of a half court guy. I mean, they weren't playing with that type of pace, so that's definitely helped. But they're really good defensively. They're really good on the glass. They don't have an overwhelming amount of talent, but their connectivity on both ends, and then just the fact that they don't often beat themselves. And I don't care going into this game too. I mentioned it. I said they haven't played a really tough schedule, but I don't care who you are and who you're playing. We saw Michigan go down at Minnesota, and we've seen all sorts of teams lose over the past few weeks. Purdue loses at Penn State, and like all the teams at the top of the Big Ten that have lost, like not all of them have been like good losses. So Michigan State not playing a really strong schedule to start conference play, you still got to credit them for winning those games, because that could very easily be let down. Haven't played one of the top teams in the Big Ten. You got to stay focused, and they've
always got 2 of those losses, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they went in Northwestern. They took care of business. They went into Minnesota. They took care of business. Beat the crap out of Nebraska at home. I mean, they've continued to win and rely on. You talked about depth, defense, rebounding. I mean, the shooting hasn't even really had to come into play for them, just because it's weird. They're the best free throw shooting team in the country or in the conference, yet they're the worst 3-point shooting team, one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in America. So, but February, what's crazy is they're 7-0 right now, and they have a really good chance to be 9-0. They go to Rutgers, not an easy place to play. But then they're home against Minnesota. Could very easily be 9-0. The test is going to be February for them. But even in February, right, you go West Coast swing, USC, UCLA, and then you got Oregon at home, Indiana at home. You go to Illinois. Then you go Oregon at home, Indiana at home, to Illinois, Purdue back at home, and then at Michigan, at Maryland, and then I think home for Wisconsin, if I remember correctly. So that's 8 games in February, or without Wisconsin. Wisconsin's first week in March. 8 games in February, and even if they split those, you're 13-4.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're 13-4. So and you're probably still in a really good spot. I think that Illinois. I'm not saying their chances are cooked. I don't think that by any means, but you look back at Northwestern and USC, and I mean, I just think that those are ones you probably needed to get if you wanted a chance of winning it. Because I just think Purdue's in a really good spot, and Michigan State's in a really good spot. I think it's going to come down to those 2 teams.
I think Illinois, Michigan are probably the Big Ten's best bet to get to a Final Four, just because of the matchups.
Yeah,
to win the conference, I just look at Michigan State and Purdue and their consistency, Mike. Like, it's just the consistency of those 2 teams might not overwhelm you with talent, but there's enough talent. There's a lot of experience there. Who would be your odds? If you had to make odds, how would you kind of list them between those 4 teams? I mean, Illinois got to be last because they have 3 losses.
Yeah, Michigan State's got the best odds for sure. I mean, a big component of conference play is doing your work early. Mm-hmm. When they won back in 2022, I think it was 2022. I think they started 6-0. If I remember correctly, and I can tell you in
22 was Wisconsin and Illinois.
Yeah, they started 6-0. They started 10-2. I mean, they did their work early and you don't have to scramble and hope for tiebreakers at the end. I mean, that's what Michigan State's got going for them. Now, I will say, would not be surprised to see them lose one of these next 2 games.
Yeah,
would not shock me. But even then, you're 8-1. And if you split those February games, you're 12-4. I mean, it's still a good spot to be in. So it'll be fascinating. It'll be fascinating to see because, like Illinois will probably have to come close to, I don't want to say running the table, but you
got to pull off like a 7-8 game win streak at some point, right? Like
you probably need to go to have a share of the conference. You probably need to go 10-2 to finish. And for all these teams at the top of the Big Ten, these schedules are backloaded. Mm-hmm. So the harder games are coming for
then that
all
works
these teams at the top.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the networks know what they do. All right, for Illinois, you got to bounce back. Haven't lost back-to-back games since the end of the 22-23 season. Maryland comes to town. Maryland's been an issue for Illinois. It's a different-looking Maryland team, though a couple of guys are holdovers, including Reese. What do you think of this Maryland matchup on Thursday, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, complete 180 from the team you played last year, and the team you played last year, outside of you took care of business at their place, but that was one of the worst games of the year for Illinois at home against Maryland last year. You remember we were doing the film. I was just the effort, the focus, and this is the exact middle of January spot. You hope that was the USC game and you just bag it, tag it, and but a complete 180. I mean, Jameer Young was the engine for them last year, and this year they're much more balanced. Got a potential first round pick who I don't even think is their most impactful player. Jacoby Gillespie has just been an outstanding pickup from Belmont, really pushes the pace. This is a team that's gone from 155th last year offensively to top 30 this year. That is a big, big shift, particularly when you have the same staff. All right, you see those shifts happen, like Michigan made a massive jump, overhauled their staff, new system, all that. But, they're a lot more talented. Selton Miguel, transfer from South Florida. I talked about Gillespie. Those are guys that are, 40+% from three. Rodney Rice, another guy that's been really good for them. Derek Queen obviously is kind of a jack of all trades, Draymond Green type of guy. Julian Reese, we saw what he did last year. They're a good team. They've lost some close ones, but this is a team that presses more than anybody in the conference. About a third of their defensive possessions are press. And you know who's eviscerated press this year? The Illinois Fighting Illini. So I'll be really interested to see, can you take care of the ball? Can you take care of business? Because if they want to press you the majority of the game, I think that favors Illinois. You just want to have your best player on the floor. And that, just to tie it all back to what we said in the beginning, it's imperative for him to stay on the floor and be able to manage things as they throw this pressure at you.
Listen, I know Maryland right now is, 14-5, 4-4 in the Big Ten. Right now they're 24 in the net, Mike. This could be a quad one victory at home. Like, maybe it'll fluctuate throughout the season, but this is a huge opportunity for Illinois. And then on Sunday, get Northwestern back. It's time for revenge for that game. Northwestern Big Ten play has not been kind for them, but boy, they've pushed some teams. Michigan got a scare in overtime at home from them. Penn State, they lost in a close game. Michigan State, they're within 10 there, but beat Maryland in overtime. This isn't a great Northwestern team, but we know Barnhizer and Martinelli are really good, and Illinois didn't have an answer for them late. So that's one you got to get back. But this is a week if you want to make that run, you got to win both these games.
Yeah, got to protect home court. Martinelli and Barnhizer have just been one of the best duos in the conference. They've been just awesome, and they've been, Collins is the Tibbs of the Big Ten, man. I mean, he's his two best players. You're playing 39 minutes, whether you like it or not. And it's what's crazy is they're playing 39 minutes a game in conference. And we talk about the foul trouble thing. Those guys find a way to play hard, play defense, and stay out of it. So yeah, I mean, I think it feels like this game. I know they took care of them big time last year at home, but these guys are tough, man. These guys are tough. I mean, Leach got thrown out of that game against Michigan, or they probably would have got a win on the road. And so, you got to deal with some of the trapping that they're going to throw at you. This is a team that you went on the road to play, that you had that game kind of in hand with 6-7 minutes left and let it slip away. But I'm looking at Benham Rickhouse. I mean, he's going to get the Martinelli matchup at times, and I think he's made strides. There's no doubt he's made strides defensively. Just all the crap that was being talked about him a month ago. I mean, he's been a really, really impactful defender, I think, for Illinois. So when they isolate with Barnhizer, when they isolate with Martinelli, because you better believe they're going to try to find KJ. They're going to try to find him. I mean, you see the disparity between when he's on the floor and when he's not. They're going to try to throw him into matchups, and that's why I'm looking for Illinois. Do you let him play straight up on guys like that, or do you try to protect him and not have that matchup? We'll see. We'll see, because they're going to try to hunt it.
And you wonder if Trey White actually just counted on to guard somebody, because at that point they didn't, right? That was a surprise going to that game.
Yeah. No, I like the Trey White and and Ben both, I think, struggled in that game at Northwestern. So they got a big opportunity to make an impact in this one.
Mike LaTulip, you're the goods. We'll catch up next week as we learn more and more about this Illinois team, man.
Appreciate it, man.